Hello there. I wanted to move into part 2 at looking at the Private Eye article, part 7 in the series of the Lucy Letby articles that Dr. Philip Hammond has been writing in Private Eye. So that's what I'm going to do. But before I do that, I wanted to just run over a couple of other things. Something came out in the BBC. There was a report dated yesterday. The title is "Grievance Panel Saw Lucy Letby as, quote, victim of a witch hunt." So this is in relation to the Thirlwall inquiry and the various documents that are coming out there and people giving testimony. And so what's happened is, in relation to this article, is that certain people are speaking. There's a lady called Annette Weatherly, and she was the independent chairwoman of the grievance panel for the grievance that Lucy Letby brought. She brought it in September 2016, a few months after she'd been moved to administrative duties. And she believes, and did believe at the time anyway, certainly at the time, as did Dr. Green, who was the individual. I have to refer to different documents here on my computer. There was a Dr. Green, Chris Green. He was the investigating officer within the hospital itself. And then you've got these external people heading up, chairwoman of a grievance panel, and there'll be other people involved as well. There's a lady called Ms. Appleton Cairns. She was on the grievance panel herself, and she also confirmed that she said, quote, "We all think the same, it's so sad," i.e. that it's a witch hunt from the consultants in question in respect of Lucy Letby, that they were on a witch hunt. And elsewhere I'd heard some time ago that Dr. Chris Green, I think he was from the pharmacy department at Countess of Chester Hospital, that he thought the consultants were behaving in a deplorable fashion, as indeed they were and are still. So that's a BBC article. It goes into some other aspects, and I think this has been reported in several other newspapers. And one particular newspaper is the Herald, a Scottish newspaper, that goes into a lot more detail. I'll put the links to both the BBC article and the Herald article below. The title of the Herald article is "Rumours Spread that Lucy Letby Rejected Advances of Consultant Inquiry Hears." That was the rumour that was going round. Elsewhere, Karen Rees has testified that when Karen Rees asked Lucy Letby about that, she denied that had happened. But these rumours have resurfaced in the context of the Thirlwall inquiry now. What the truth of that is, I don't know. I mean, it was denied by Lucy, according to Karen Rees, it was denied that Lucy Letby told Karen Rees, "No, it's nothing like that." There's the exact quote in here somewhere in this article, but I'll put that below as well, both the articles. And just before I go back to the Private Eye article, there's a third thing I want to mention, and it's in respect to a Twitter account holder called Jabe, Jabe, and their Twitter handle, sorry, it's gone a bit dark, isn't it? Their Twitter handle is Jabes Allowed. So if you're on Twitter, it's Jabes Allowed, at capital JABES, capital ALLOWED. And they're a brilliant account that have gone into so much detail in their tweets, but they've done something else which is absolutely magnificent, what they've done. And I'm going to leave a link to that as well. So what they've done actually, so it's whenever I press a screen on here that's white as opposed to dark, the light gets up a bit better. I've got to figure out the lighting. It's the lighting guy's day off, you know. It reminds me of the joke somebody said, it was in the Raw family or some very posh family, and somebody says, "Oh dear, have you seen the garlic crusher?" And he goes, No, dear, I think it is day off. Sorry, I'll get me coat. Anyway, it's a serious matter, but it just reminded me of that. But what Jabe has done is put all in one place in an address here. He or she, I don't know if it's he or she, there's a picture of a lovely spaniel on their account on X, Twitter. And they put everything in order that has been released by the Thirlwall inquiry. They put it all in order, evidence by source date, and then after that they've uploaded via this link all the documents in order, in a very easy to quote from format and a very easy to read format, because it's not always that easy from the original. That's an enormous amount of work they've done, and I'm very grateful to them. I think many other people are as well. So thank you, Jabe. Jabe's Allowed on Twitter, and I'll leave the link to what Jabe has done there. I think that's all I want to say before going back to the Private Eye article. The only other thing is that, well, no, I have got some other documents here which I'm wondering whether to make as a separate video to look into, and one is this is one of the documents that Thirlwall inquiry has released, and it's Dr. Jayaram's interview with Dr. Chris Green, who's the investigator from Countess of Chester Hospital into Lucy Letby's grievance. And it's a bit of an interview here that might be worth going through, but I won't mix everything all together, otherwise it gets too long and too much, I think. So that's a possibility for the future. Excuse me. As is the letter from Lucy's parents to the hospital, which is incredibly, very moving, very, what they were going through, the pain on behalf of their daughter, and when they knew what their daughter had been put through. That was at the time before the police were involved, of course. But they knew that their daughter was, as other people said, she's the victim of a witch hunt. She's the victim of bullying just an appalling, to an appalling degree. So again, perhaps that will be a different video. I'm not sure if that is appropriate to make a video about that letter, but I'll have a think about it and have a read over it again. But anyway, for the rest of this video, I'll just go a bit further into part 7 in the ongoing series from the Private Eye, written by MD, which is Dr. Philip Hammond. So where were we? We finished off, there's a series of paragraphs here entitled This Argument, That Argument, This Argument. So we finished off last time with the insulin argument. So the next one is the air embolism argument. And it says as follows, and I'll interject if I can think of anything that I think might be worthwhile to say. The air embolism argument. Thanks to an email released by the Thirlwall inquiry, we know the consultant suspected death by air embolism in 2016. So why not tell the coroner? Good question. Not only is it a professional and safeguarding duty, it also covers your backs and passes legal responsibility to the coroner to investigate. I just want to interject here that this Shuley paper from 1987, was it 87 or 89? I can't remember, sorry, I can't keep all the dates in my head. In the late 80s, the paper that apparently Jayaram found back in 2015, I think, either 2015 or 2016. So he says, and then Evans independently found that very same paper as well. And the reason I'm bringing that up is just, again, I think it's another red flag about what is actually covering up the collusion, that they say they independently found those papers to base their judgments on. Initially the consultants, apparently just them, and then Evans independently, a couple of years later, finds the same paper and uses that. Well, misuses it. The consultants misuse it. Then Evans misuses it. Then the police misuse it. Then the CPS and the prosecution misuse it. That's not me saying they're misusing it. It's the author of the paper, Dr. Shuley, who stated that at Lucy Letby's request for application for appeal earlier this year in respect of the full trial rather than the Baby K case, which was also turned down as well. Where was I? I go on a bit and then I lose my place. But anyway, we're here now. Instead of telling the coroner, the consultant sent a begging letter to their chief executive, Tony Chambers, on the 10th of February 2017. So look how long they've lasted. They've waited. Quote, "We are respectfully requesting you to urgently ask the coroner to undertake a full investigation of all the deaths." So why couldn't they do it themselves? This is the point that Dr. Philip Hammond's making. "We're respectfully requesting you to urgently ask the coroner to undertake a full investigation of all the deaths and unexpected collapses that occurred on the neonatal unit before 2015, between 2015, June 2015 and July 2016. I just want to interject some points here because I've done it many times before in other videos. They're not interested in the death in August of 2016. They're not interested in even looking at that because Lucy Letby's been removed, which shows that they're not so much interested. It's clearly another huge red flag, is it not? That they're not interested in the deaths per se, in the increase in mortality per se. Otherwise, why cut off in July? Why not include the August 2016 death? And indeed, it is my belief that that August 2016 death was never looked at by Evans, nor indeed was it looked at by the police or the CPS or anybody at all. So they're not interested in the deaths going up overall, only in relation to an artificially chosen section of time that they have chosen. And moreover, and this is a quoted passage here from this letter to Tony Chambers, when he says in the quoted passage, "To a full investigation of all the deaths and unexpected collapses." Well, because unexpected collapses, and we know this for a fact now, we didn't know it a couple of months ago, that they're not formally recorded. So to undertake a full investigation of them is impossible because they're not recorded. Only certain ones have been recorded ad hoc by Breary for a particular purpose en route through that time, and they're only the ones that he can pin somehow on Lucy Letby. So he's not interested again, and the consultants as a group are not interested in unexpected collapses per se. They're only interested in ones that they choose from a subset, a subset from an overall figure, the size of which we have no idea. There could have been many dozens, could have been 100 over those 2 years that met the same criteria in terms of something that was unexpected. How do we know? We're never going to know. It's just that it's put there so that you're meant to miss that. You're meant to miss it, you see. That they're interested in it's only unexpected because they say so. And the ones that Lucy Letby, wasn't on shift for and something happens they don't want anybody to find out about. Maybe there were mistakes made by doctors. Well, they're not going to bring them into the forefront, are they? They're not going to bring them to anybody's notice because they're not ones that they can push the responsibility for onto a particular person, i.e. Lucy Letby. Okay, so that's that quote here. That's what they said they wanted to happen. I've gone over the problems with that there. And back to what Philip Hammond is saying here, Dr. Philip Hammond. This was far too late for the right tests to be done. Well, indeed, and that is a very important point. He goes on to say, all 7 babies who died are alleged to have had air injected into a vein. Right, all 7. Okay. If enough is injected, it can coalesce, he says, into a frothy mass in the right side of the heart. And that blocks it off, or it can pass through a hole in the heart. This is Dr. Philip Hammond saying this. The definitive methods of proving this, i.e. that it had indeed happened, are a CT scan of the baby post-mortem, which are far more accurate than X-rays, he asserts, or opening the heart underwater to observe air bubbles. So they're the tests you can do. Post-mortem neonatal CT scans are now routine in many centres, but they were not in 2015, 2016. So we know there were 6 post-mortems of those 7 deaths that end up on the indictment as murder charges, and one where one of the doctors seemingly encouraged the parents not to have a post-mortem because they said it wasn't necessary. But it seems to be saying here that at that time those other tests weren't done routinely, the CT scan of the baby post-mortem. Okay, all the doctors had to do, Philip Hammond says, was request one at that time. So that it wasn't that the technology wasn't there, they just weren't done routinely. But all they had to do was request one to check for the air embolism they suspected. This is where they're getting caught out now, when they, obviously it's been possible for them to be caught out for a long time but it's being very specific about, well, why didn't you do this then? And this is the point that he's making. Why didn't you report it to the coroner? Why didn't you report it to the child death overview panel? Why didn't you ring the police yourself if you wanted to? Your agent? Why did you sit on all this for all this time if you really believed it? Or were you just, this is me speaking now, or were you just trying to push somebody out of the unit and then would have said nothing ever about it ever again? And I think that is clearly the case. That's what would have happened. Because they didn't really believe it. They just got a fixation on someone and they targeted them and they were involved in a witch hunt. Okay, so where was I here? The CT scans are now routine. All the doctors had to do was to request one to check for the air embolism they suspected. If they were that frightened, Philip Hammond says, of their chief executive, which was Tony Chambers at the time, they didn't even have to mention murder, as air emboli can happen accidentally. Yes, we know that from other sources, and Dr. Michael McConville, in his ongoing series, The Other Side of Lucy Letby, speaks a lot about that, a lot about the detail of that. I'll put the link up to that again, just in case anybody watching this hasn't seen the link before. He's up to more than 30 episodes now of this brilliant podcast Dr. McConville has done, and is likely to do more, I'm sure. Okay, this idea about them being, this is me speaking now, not quoting, this is the idea that they're frightened of the chief executive. Well, they're so frightened of him, they get him pushed out. They get him pushed out, and they get the medical director, Ian Harvey, pushed out very soon afterwards. So they can't be that frightened of them. They seem to have the power to make that happen. So that they jump, effectively. They retire, so they know that they're being pushed out. Alas, Dr. Hammond writes, the doctors didn't do their duty, and any chance of definitively proving and, just as important, disproving death by venous air embolism was lost. All the evidence we have is the clinical records, highly disputed skin rashes, and just to say, Dr. Michael McConville says, well, they're not rashes at all, they're not a rash, they're not a lesion in that sense, they're not a rash, they're technically not a rash. What's going on there? highly disputed skin rashes, and a couple of ambiguous X-rays. Indeed, that's all there is. No, it's impossible to prove. It's not that not only that it wasn't proven, it's impossible to prove scientifically and medically, as well as all the other arguments, of which there are many. I think I'm going to leave it there. It's about 20 minutes. It's going to take a while to go through this article. I'm doing it, as I mentioned before, in order to, hopefully, the intention is to consolidate it with other things that are being said, other things that are being mentioned, that have been mentioned in the past, other links that I personally feel are relevant, and that's why I'm doing it, not just for the sake of reading out an article that you can read yourself. I'll put the link again to the parts 1 to 7 of the private eye sequence of articles. I'll put that link in the description bar as well. I did it last time, but I'll do it every time, so that you can download the PDFs yourself and read them at your leisure. And I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to wish you a good evening, and I'll pick up the next part, which is the next section is called the air in the stomach argument. So I'll pick that up next time, and all the best. Thank you for listening. If you have, take care and good night.